User experience, or UX, refers to the experience someone has when interacting with a product or service. From finding a service in Google to understanding a product offering to purchasing the product and sharing a review, UX is about managing website visitors' perceptions of ease of use and getting things done quickly. Everyone has had the experience of being completely lost about what to do next on a website. If you can't find the link, can't understand the product offering, or misunderstand what you're being asked to do, that's a UX fail in process. UX practitioners are all about identifying and eliminating those moments in existing products and preventing those moments in new products. The UX field is broad, and the definition of UX seems to be changing frequently. However, by most definitions, a UX professional may be a generalist or a specialist in one area of UX. Generalists often work with small businesses, startups, and nonprofits through the entire UX process. They identify organizational, user, and website goals. They define and refine the target audience, the group of individuals who need this product or service. They study how problems are solved now, how they could be solved in the future, and how we could simplify the process of solving those problems. They may create prototypes and test them with members of their target audience to help create specifications and pass to an engineering team to implement. UX specialists focus on one area of UX in a deep way. For example, an information architect often focuses on organization of information. This person may have a background in database design or in library science. They're interested in classification, identifying and refining terms, and organizing the site or application so that information is easy to find. Other specialists focus deeply on user research, user testing, branding, content design, and many other areas. If you're a curious person who enjoys research and learning about new fields, or if you're interested in changing the world through better technology, but you don't want to write the code for it, UX may be for you. Some professionals have a background in psychology, or they're just interested in how people think. UX professionals are open-minded, ready to receive feedback from users and managers. They also have some strong opinions about what makes users happy and what makes a great interface. But they're also ready to let those opinions go if testing shows they're wrong. UX professionals rarely write code themselves. However, they should understand the coding process so that they're better able to communicate with their team and understand what makes a codable interface. UX professionals use prototyping software to test their interfaces. The most popular product for this is Figma, but Sketch, Adobe XD, InVision, or Balsamiq are other common choices, among many others. And finally, UX professionals rely heavily on sticky notes for creating workflows and organizing information. By the very nature of this work, UX professionals talk to people a lot. They talk with management, with people on the development team, and with people in their target audience. They are good at putting people at ease, and they're naturally curious about everyone and how they think. While UX professionals spend the occasional day in front of their computer without talking to anyone, those days aren't too common. Expect lots of meetings and discussions to be a regular part of your workday in this field. If you're into building instead of research, and if you enjoy making things pretty, you might like the world of user interface design, or UI. UI designers focus on the interface or the front end of the website or application. That's the customer-facing portion of the site, the part you see when you visit any website. There are tons of job titles for this type of work. You might be an interaction designer, a UI specialist, a front-end designer, or a front-end developer. Or you might just be a web designer. Whatever the name, the UI designer is a bridge between the UX researchers and the graphic designers and the programming team. As such, UI designers must do a little code and a little design work. You may have some expertise in animation, and on the web, those animations happen through code. You'll certainly know HTML and CSS, and you'll probably know a bit of JavaScript as well. However, JavaScript will focus on the interface primarily and much less on other aspects of programming. Some UI designers are deeply focused in one of these areas, or their generalists are more fluent in several areas of UI design. As the UI designer bridges research and programming, they are familiar with tons of software. They are experts in Figma, Adobe XD, or similar prototyping tools that the UX team uses. They know a little bit about the Adobe products that the graphic design team uses for making logos, icons, and other graphics. They also have software for editing code. Examples include Sublime Text, VS Code, Brackets, or Atom. Commonly, UI specialists will also interface with the command line and services like Git, GitHub, and Node.js. UI designers have mixed days in terms of meetings and focused work. When handing off projects from UX or to the programming team, there may be many meetings required to make a smooth transition. However, there may be other days or weeks the UI designer is working alone, creating animations or code to reflect the plans from the UX research. Giving and receiving respectful feedback well will also be an important part of the workday. Sound like fun? Want to give it a go? There are several possible learning paths for user interface and web design. Beef up your prototyping skills with the Improve Your UX Prototyping Skills learning path. This path will teach you about how to prototype, as well as to teach you software like Sketch, InVision, and Framer. You could also look at the Improve Your Web Design Coding Skills learning path. This will teach you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, assuming absolutely no background in any of these topics. Prototyping is the process of creating a model of a future product. A prototype needs to be created quickly and changed easily because it's likely that several versions of a prototype will be required before the right version is created. With each prototype, a round of user testing is typically performed, analyzed, and measured, and changes are made. To keep costs low and possible interfaces high, prototyping software is often used. With prototyping software, no coding is required. As you might imagine, coding is a complex and time-involved process. It's not easy to make changes, and it takes time to develop a quality product. Eliminating the coding process is critical to moving quickly and making changes. Prototyping software typically features a drag and drop interface, often with several pre-configured interface options like buttons, search boxes, form elements, navigation bars, and more. You can import graphics like logos and photos. Often, you can add links between prototype screens and small animations when something is clicked. Let's take a quick peek at some prototyping software to see how this type of software looks and functions. This is Figma. You can sign up for a free account at figma.com. I wanted to briefly walk you through the kinds of problems that Figma happens to solve. So this is the dashboard. Once you have created an account and logged in, you'll see something like this. You'll have the ability to create several kinds of files. So you can create the type of file for designs and prototypes. I'm going to show you one of those in a moment. You have the ability to create a FigJam file, which, as it says here, is like whiteboards, diagrams, sticky notes, that kind of thing. I'll show you that in a moment as well. Or you can import a file from someplace else. So maybe you have somebody else's Figma file, or you have a file from some other program like Sketch. Using the Figma community, which is over here on the left-hand side, I found some examples for us to just briefly take a look at. So here's an example of a web page layout that comes from the community. Somebody already designed this for you to take a look at with the intention that you can learn Figma from this, or you can take this and tweak it a little bit and turn it into a different kind of design. So those of you who are familiar with Photoshop, you'll notice this might look somewhat familiar. We have various types of layers and so forth over here on this side. So as I click on things, you can see we are selecting different elements here on the page. Okay, there's that tiny emoji up there at the top. You, of course, can zoom in or zoom out, zoom to fit, whatever is best for you. Let's zoom in a little bit. So, for example, here in this box, I might want to make some changes to this. I can, of course, double click on this and change the text. I want to work from home every day. Or whatever changes you wanted to make here. You could select other elements. This is a grouping here. If we group inside of this, there's a vector diagram, there's some text associated with this, and then there's this little icon here. We could turn off the eyeball. That would remove that from view. We could also select this little guy here. Maybe we get rid of that. So we can just continue to make changes here. We can make changes to colors. As you see here, the background for this, let me zoom back out again so we can see this. The background for the page overall is this light gray color. We could easily change that background color to something else, maybe this dark gray. And you'll notice that these are in hexadecimal format. We've talked about that other places in the course. So those colors that might come to you from some kind of branding document in hexadecimal format, you can just type those colors right into Figma and make use of them. So this is the kind of thing that you can expect here within Figma for laying out web pages. You have the ability to place shapes and images and so forth. You have some basic drawing tools that are available to you. You have some text tools that are available, and you can make comments and share these with your team. Let's take a brief look over here at a FigJam document. So this is somewhat the same, but also somewhat different. The FigJam functionality, I think, would be most used by people who are working with user experience. In other words, they are researching and planning some kind of document rather than putting together the actual graphic design or a true interface prototype. This is from earlier in the process of developing a website or web application. In this case, I'm looking at the consumer journey map here. And as we have done before, we can zoom in and take a closer look at this. So we have an introductory graphic that we have here. We have the ability to put in information about a persona that we might be working with, and we could make a graph here. We have sticky notes that are spanning across these 4 boxes. This is a pretty common sort of technique that UX people use for organizing a customer journey. So how are people interacting with your product or service from when they find it all the way through until they purchase it, and how are they using it to address problems within their lives? So here we have actions, experience, opportunities, and pain points. These sticky notes could easily be rearranged. You just click and drag. We aren't zoomed in far enough to read what they say. There actually isn't any text on these, but as you can expect, you double click on this and say, this is a sticky note. So there's the sticky note. If we wanted it to be a different color, we have a few choices. We can pick a different color for our sticky note. Down here in our tray, we have the ability to click and drag and add other ones here. We can also click and drag other shapes. And of course, there are many choices of shapes to choose from. That would be useful if you were putting together something like a flow chart, which is a pretty common type of way of planning some kind of functionality inside of a web application. We have the ability to draw on the page. So I can make some kind of drawing here, and it smooths it out for me really nicely. We have the ability to put in various kinds of stamps. So if I really love this particular sticky note, I can put hearts on it. We also have the ability to add silly things here. These are just stickers and so forth. And wow, that's a really great idea. Let's label it as fresh. So this is just a very brief overview to give you an idea of what Figma is and how it works. There are two sides to Figma. Side number one that I'm looking at right here is this whiteboarding, sticky note, planning, diagramming type of tool, which is called FigJam. And the other side of it is more typically used for planning web pages and prototyping site designs, where you can put in all kinds of pretty elements to the interface, line things up, and truly draw out what a web page will look like. These days, it seems like everyone is doing a little graphic design, creating PowerPoint slides, social media illustrations, and logos for side hustles. However, for other people, graphic design is the focus of their career. What other kinds of tools do graphic designers use to complete their work? Most professional graphic designers learn the Adobe suite of tools as part of their education. They are experts at two packages in particular. Illustrator is used for illustrations and logos. If it's a drawing, Illustrator is often the place to do it. Illustrator's files are vector files, which means they are composed of math that describes the curves and lines in the illustration. As such, these kinds of drawings may be displayed online using the SVG format, or Scalable Vector Graphic. These graphics load quickly because of their small file size. Photoshop was originally used for processing photos, including cropping, cleaning them up, annotating them, and more. Photoshop produces raster graphics, or graphics made up of individual pixels. Exported images are usually in GIF, PNG, or JPEG format to display on the web. What if you don't have the money to afford the Adobe Suite, or if you don't need its power? You might look at Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo. Affinity Designer is more similar to Illustrator. It doesn't offer all of Illustrator's features, but some find that an advantage, as they feel Designer's interface is simpler than Illustrator. Similarly, Affinity Photo doesn't quite offer everything that Photoshop does. However, Affinity Photo offers a familiar Photoshop-like interface and many of the critical features needed for retouching photos and creating beautiful raster graphics. Many graphic designers are starting to incorporate Figma into their work as well. While Figma is primarily a prototyping tool, it does offer some basic graphic design tools for creating quick logos and other graphics for your site. If you're not a professionally trained graphic designer, but you're called on to do the occasional graphic design work, you may want to take a look at Canva. Canva offers a ton of templates to start many types of graphic design work. It offers color palettes, easy type choices, and a simple interface for creating graphics that look good without a steep learning curve. If you have no background in graphic design, Canva is not a bad choice to start work. It has a free plan, so you can give it a whirl without commitment.